Okay, so we want to move on and look at rear hand techniques, and we're going to look at a limited number of techniques, the what we might say the equivalent of the basic cross, the overhand, the uppercut and the hook. And that then leads into these questions that are not entirely illegitimate, where people say, well, that's just Western boxing. And I say that's not entirely illegitimate because Wang Shengjai himself makes several points where he'll say something like, we do this technique, it's similar in some ways to Western boxing, but it's not like Western boxing. So that begs the question of, like, what is the difference with Western boxing? But one of the big problems with these arguments is usually that it's about techniques. These techniques are from Western boxing, whereas Wang Shengjai is also explicit that it doesn't matter where the technique comes from, whether it's Chinese or foreign, in his words. So he also says multiple times it's not about techniques, and that's one of our core ideas within Yiquan, that it's about movement quality. That's why we do all the training that we do. We're developing a certain kind of movement quality. It's not about techniques. Or more accurately, we should say that techniques are secondary. So there is a certain point where this other side of the coin, where you've got people who practice Chinese martial arts who are then saying, well, it is just kickboxing. It's just kickboxing, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of explanation for why, in that case, they would do the kind of slow movement, for example, in Tai Chi Chuan, or they would practice forms. What's the point? So I can't understand that myself. Like, if it really is just kickboxing, then why not just do kickboxing? If it really is just MMA, why not just do MMA? Because that's simpler and it has proven outcomes, and why would you need to do any of this other stuff? So there's these two sides of the coin. This isn't the place to have that discussion. All I want to emphasise here is that there's a certain set of principles that we're trying to understand with each one and with our training practice. And as always with each one, if we learn one thing, we're learning 50 things. That's the way the method is structured. So if you're learning something, for example, let's say we're learning the equivalent of a basic rear hand cross and we're bringing it up to bag work like we are today. There's 50 different things that are involved with that, and there's also 150 different things that it applies to beyond that. So we're always learning in this kind of amplifying effect. Learning and training. So one of the things that all of these techniques I'm showing on the bag do is start forcing Fa Li to develop by forcing you to do things with small movements without any pre-movements, that you have to develop the correct kind of movement to be able to do the exercises. There's just no choice. There's no option. So we're kind of boxing you in so that you've got to do the movements in the correct way, and then Fa Li will kind of develop organically from that. Secondly, we want to learn about how structure is affected just through these 5 different techniques, the overhand, the uppercut, the hook and the cross, how that just puts a different kind of strain or a different kind of challenge on the way that you route and control and transmit force. I'm not going to talk about that here because we're going to come back again and look at bone alignment, muscle alignment, all those things we've talked about before, but you start feeling them really powerfully now that we start to use a punch bag. What we're going to do with these follow-along exercises is you're just going to feel it. You're going to feel it naturally. It doesn't really need any explanation. You can just feel it naturally. So what I do want to do then is talk about how we use Fa Li with the cross, because very interestingly, the cross is like the biggest Fa Li that we do, and that might not make sense at first till you think about what I said about the kick, that when you do a kick, most of that is travelling time, and the Fa Li is the last bit at the end. So the Fa Li movement, I came across this thing. I was on holiday in Wales. I was in Abu Dhabi, which is lovely if you've never been, and I saw this thing on the road that's supposed to stop people from parking there, but seemed to invite some people to park there. But I managed to take this photograph because I thought it exemplified exactly the kind of idea that we're trying to get across here. And this is what we call hourglassing. So we can imagine, although this is a very square on stance, that this highlighted section is your lead shoulder and this section is your rear shoulder. And what we want to do is, in a very short, sharp movement, swap them round so that what was your rear shoulder switches and moves forward, and then simultaneously what was the lead shoulder, so your lead hand where you might jab from, that's going to switch and become, or it's going to move back into place on the same line where the rear shoulder was. And that line down the side is basically the movement of your shoulders, the shimmy of your shoulders, and that constitutes the space over which the Farley is going to take place. And as we've learned before, the body has its own kind of somatic measurement. So a cross is like one full unit, but a jab, for example, is like half a unit because your shoulders are already half opened when you use open. And if you look at something like this exercise that we've done before, you can see that most of this movement is travelling distance, and then the jab is actually a tiny little movement at the end, like the Farley, the opening of the shoulders is a tiny little movement at the end. That's about half the size of a cross. So we could say that the jab is 1 unit and the cross is 2 units of length, or the other way around, the cross is 1 unit of length and the jab is half a unit. Doesn't make any difference. The cross is twice the size of the jab in terms of the amount of distance that the shoulders travel. Just that with the cross it uses close and with the jab it uses open. What matters for us is to get our movement explosive and to move from the shoulders first so that the hand goes out like a spike. Whatever technique that we're doing, the hand, well, not with a kick obviously, but with a punch, the hand goes out like a spike and we don't lead from the hand. So you can see this movement. You can see when someone's leading from the hand, i.e. the shoulders are following onto the hand. So there's lots of things around that. But first of all, let's follow along, have a practice, basic techniques, just using with a lighter bag first, just practicing some techniques and feeling the movement, but really concentrating on this shimmy and get it in time with the punch, by the way. So when we spar, we usually break the rhythm so that we do the punch slightly after the movement of the shoulder. That takes all the power out of the punch. So if you watch this again carefully, you can see that I'm hitting with really light power, and that's because I've broken my structure so that I'm not transmitting the force. But when we do the bag work, no, we want to get the punch of the technique in line with the movement of the shoulders so that we have bone alignment or muscle alignment all in line at the point where we hit. But we start by building that up with a lighter bag first, then we'll get on the heavier bag later. So have a look and follow along.